Right, good morning everyone. Welcome to this morning's webinar on delivering new communities, specifically on how project and programme management can help with successful delivery. I'm Katie Locke, I'm the Director of Communities here at the TCPA, and I'm going to be your chair for today's event. We've got a packed agenda for you. In the next hour and a half, we'll be delving into the technical details of project and programme management of large schemes, including the launch of a new publication on the subject. We're delighted to have partnered with ACOM for this event and publication. So to launch the publication, we'll be hearing from ACOM's programme management experts about taking a programmatic approach to delivering new communities. My colleagues at TCPA will then take you through the content of the new guide. Following a Q&A, we'll then be hearing from two local authority representatives about how they have tackled this delivery challenge for their new community project. We really hope that you'll engage with the session and send in your questions. Please use the question box, the Q&A box for that. We'll be monitoring that throughout the event. So for any of you that are new to the TCPA, there's lots of familiar names on the list, delighted to see, but for those who are less familiar with TCPA, we're an independent campaigning and research charity with a mission to challenge, inspire and support people to create healthy, sustainable and resilient places that are fair for everyone. We recently launched a new 5-year strategy, which we hope you will check out. But today's event and the publication that we're launching today were actually developed in response to requests and discussions with the TCPA's new communities group. The group was actually established originally as part of the Eco Towns programme with government, but today is a self-sustaining group consisting of 27 local authorities across England delivering large-scale new communities. Collectively, actually over 280,000 new homes across England. The group collectively helps to deliver plans, provide political support and the sharing of knowledge and best practice through projects and events. If you're not already a member and you're delivering a large scheme, do come and talk to us about your project. We'd love to hear from you. We're always open to new members. Now, new communities remain an important part of the portfolio of solutions needed to address the housing crisis. The TCPA has produced a wealth of guidance on how to design and plan for and deliver new communities and the Garden City principles in the current political context, but also more strategically what needs to be done to ensure we're delivering the scale, type, and quality of genuinely affordable and healthy places that we need across the UK. If you haven't seen those publications and guidance documents, do check them out on our website. But today we're going to be delving into the detail a little bit more. You know, how can we ensure that those high ambitions are actually delivered? This new publication we're launching today looks at some of the technical approaches places are taking to delivering on the ground. Now, we all know the early stages from plan preparation and site identification to planning permission is a complex and lengthy process. For those that get as far as that initial outline permission are then tasked with the most complex yet exciting task in urbanism. These developments are long-term projects requiring commitment from across the political, economic, corporate and planning divisions of the local authorities that help to deliver them. We know this in turn relies on a dedicated team with a breadth of expertise and a culture of positive collaboration that can really build trust between stakeholders, and we'll be hearing a bit more about that this morning. Now, in that context, we wanted to share the experience of those places who are actually delivering today to understand some of the tools and techniques available to manage this complex process within a local authority, recognising that the local authority will play a number of different roles in that time. And so the team undertook research among local authorities, private sector delivery partners and government agencies to identify some of these principles for project and programme management within the local authority. A link to the publication will be made available in the chat. Before we go on, so a huge thanks to ACOM for not only supporting the publication as sponsors, but they have been integral to the delivery and content of the guide as well. So huge thanks to Sam and Patrick and Bruno at ACOM, and my colleagues Kova and Alex at the TCPA for pulling this guide together. But that's enough from me. Let's hear from the team that produced the guide. I am delighted to introduce, first of all, Sam Ellis, who is a director at ACOM. Sam leads the program management team in the UK. He's got diverse experience of large-scale development, complex master plans and investment portfolios in residential, energy, education, transport and infrastructure sectors. His recent experience in large-scale development includes schemes for the University of Cambridge and at Old Oak for the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation. And Sam's going to take us through the importance of a programmatic approach. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks again for inviting me to speak at the launch event. I'm going to cover the importance of a programmatic approach to the planning and delivering of new communities. I'll start by framing this with the challenges that I'm sure you'll all be grappling with or about to grapple with in your specific areas, and then look at what a program is and then the things to consider in order to implement a programmatic approach in the context of delivering new communities. I'll then just run through a quick example of where this approach has been implemented and some of the benefits that have been realised. Next slide. So some of those challenges, when we consider a new community in terms of planning and delivery, it's typically delivering a vision of a future state. You know, the scale of these things, the large scale, the many interdependent packages of work, they're usually multidisciplinary by nature across all spectrums of professional services, as well as the skills that you need to bring to bear. They require, or often require, strategic infrastructure. You know, that's significant investment that could be multi-million pound, tens, even hundreds of millions of pounds, which brings with it a whole host of assurance processes and compliance with government treasury governance procedures. Long time scales. I mean, Katie said at the beginning there, they're often multi-decade. The stakeholder landscape is complex, multiple landowners and stakeholders and interested third parties. So each one of these facets on their own is complicated. You know, these are complicated activities, but when you consider them together, they're a complex endeavor. And that requires an appropriate solution to make sure that those strategic objectives that are in the vision, they're translated into achievable benefits. Next slide. So successful delivery of complex endeavours, we believe, requires a programmatic approach, and we must therefore adopt a programmatic approach for delivery of new communities. But what is a programme and how is it different to a project? An industry recognised definition is programmes provide a coordinating framework for a group of interrelated projects, often combined with change implementation and other activities, for delivery of high order outcomes and benefits. So that's quite important. So programs are about managing change with a strategic vision in place and a route map of how to get there. They're able to deal with uncertainty and allow the focus to be on achieving the desired outcomes. So a programmatic approach should be flexible and capable of accommodating changing circumstances, such as opportunities that may present themselves as we go through the various stages in the scheme. And similarly, to be able to react to risks as they materialise. The programme, it coordinates the delivery of a range of these work streams, and this is needed to achieve the specific outcomes and benefits and make sure that they're always aligned to the vision. So that's a programme. Now, in opposition, or not in opposition, but opposed to that is a project, which is more about a defined output. It operates within what we call the iron triangle of clearly defined cost, time and quality parameters. Specifically when we consider projects in a controlled environment, which is what the PRINCE project management methodology stands for, programs are very much more flexible and nuanced than that. So when considering the whole delivery of a new community, clearly skills, experience, and appropriate processes and tools are required for both project and program management. But the typical role of the local authorities, and I know that there's no typical role because we've seen through this process in itself that the role of the local authorities is very much varied throughout the different schemes. But let's just say the typical role of local authorities is more in the strategic and program space, and hence the focus of this section of the presentation. Next slide, please. So what are the key things to consider in order to make sure that we effectively establish a programmatic approach to delivery? What are the questions that we need to ask? And we need to develop the need and define the program. What are the component parts that will make up the program and the program's works, and how do we deliver against the vision? How will it be delivered, and how will the program function or operate? How will decisions be made along the journey? Who and what will be required to deliver the program? How do we make sure that the benefits are managed and that there's a golden thread from the strategic objectives that are in the vision through to the realization of the scheme on the ground? And who are the stakeholders? What are the requirements? What are the required agreements that need to be in place to successfully deliver the program? And how do we capture the requirements? How do we make sure that these are monitored and managed and the objectives of the scheme are achieved? How do we deliver technical assurance? How do we maintain control, and how do we drive efficiencies and continuous improvement? And what will demonstrate success ultimately? Next slide, please. Now that all might sound sort of scary and intimidating, but what a programmatic approach allows us to do is group these sets of questions into 7 themes. And these form the basis of the pillars of structure of program management. And these are strategic planning, governance, resource strategy and management, business planning, consents and agreements, or we term the hearts and minds from discussions with colleagues, control and assurance, and key success factors. So these pillars then all align and map back to the strategic vision to make sure that we're always working towards delivery of that overarching strategic outcome. Next slide, please. So at ACON, we use these 7 pillars in our program management playbook. The PM playbook is our methodology for approaching the setup and operating model for our programs. It's not a prescriptive guide, but it allows for the nuance required to deliver the program's strategic goals. And this is just a screen grab from that interactive playbook. Next slide, please. Okay, so when done well, what are the outcomes? What are the benefits? So a recent example of where a programmatic approach has been implemented with success is on the Homes England New Community Scheme at the Northern Arc in Burgess Hill. So ACON are working with Homes England as their multidisciplinary lead consultant, but also providing program management support to the client. Some of the benefits that have been realized from adopting this approach we've seen are a strategic approach to management whereby clear objectives have been established, quantifiable benefits identified, and this helps to drive decision making. So a flexible approach to schedule and sequencing. And this has allowed Homes England to respond to the dynamics of the market in a competitive way so that they can secure the long-term desired outcomes for the site. And that's been quite powerful to put a plan in place, but make it flexible enough that you can bend and flex to suit the prevailing conditions, and make sure that as a master developer, in this case Homes England, are driving forward and making the best decisions with the end goal in mind. A key facet or one of the outputs was a clear and easily communicated high-level plan for the whole scheme, so that everyone can quickly get an understanding of what the next steps are in the plan and what that end game is. Supported or nested within that is a detailed tranche planning for the forecast of the scope of work for the next 6 months. So that's quite powerful in the sense that the whole team knows on a week by week, month by month basis what the next steps are, who's doing what, when, and that's easily communicable around the team. A collaborative, consistent approach to risk, cost, and schedule management has been adopted across all the projects in the program, and that in itself is a unifying and efficient way of working. Creation of a control framework for the management of individual projects with key milestones, clear definition of responsibilities, and implementation of repeatable processes. And again, you're getting that you get that regular drumbeat of activity and that rhythm and repetitiveness across the programme, which drives efficiency. So as part of the governance checkpoints and gateway reviews, lessons learned have been identified, and these have been incorporated back into projects that emerge, and that drives efficiency and continuous improvement through the programme. And these benefits are more only really possible as a result of implementing a programmatic approach to delivery, and what Homes England have seen at Northern Arc Burgess Hill. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I'll just summarise some of the core skills and disciplines that are required as part of an integrated programme management approach. And you can see the sort of wheel of skills there. We've got blueprint design and strategy development, governance, lessons learned, benefits realisation, scheduling, risk assumptions, issues, dependencies and opportunities management, information management, dashboards and how that's brought together in a visual tool for decision making, change management, cost, contract and stakeholder management, and assurance. And these all come together in the shape of a PMO, or Programme Management Office, that will provide the programme capability to successfully deliver new communities. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Katie. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sam. Fascinating to have those models explained for us, and really useful context as we go forward. Moving swiftly on, I'm delighted to introduce my colleagues Alex House and Kova Savilla, who will be introducing our new technical guide for you, which is now officially launched. I'm going to hand over straight to you, Alex and Kova. Hopefully some of you know Alex. She manages our New Communities group alongside our projects and policy work relating to other large-scale development at the TCPA, as well as our conferences and webinar programme. And Kova is an Osborne Research Assistant at the TCPA, and she's integral and works alongside Alex and myself on our large-scale development projects. So Alex and Kova, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Hopefully you can all hear me. And thank you, Sam, for introducing the programmatic approach. So Kova and I will now introduce the new guide being launched today, which is Delivering New Communities, a technical guide to project and programme management for local authorities. And here it is. The guide provides technical guidance for those delivering large-scale new communities on how to take a more programmatic approach to delivery. We'll discuss the background to the project and the key principles for success. Just to say, you can download the guide from the TCPA website, and also there should be a link in the chat. Next slide. So as we all know, large-scale new communities are complex, long-term projects that require commitment from across the political, economic, corporate and planning divisions of local authorities. There is a tendency to see new community projects as purely planning issues, but in reality, they are much more complex development programmes that necessitate a programmatic approach from early on, so that all the elements can be holistically planned and delivered. That in turn is reliant on a dedicated team with a breadth of experience and a culture of positive collaboration that builds trust amongst a wide range of stakeholders. Next slide. So for this project, we were interested in issues such as how project managers work with a range of stakeholders, what internal structures within the local authority have worked well, and are project and programme management tools being utilised. Our research involved an initial survey of local authorities delivering large-scale communities, detailed discussions with 6 local authorities, followed by a stakeholder meeting. So we acknowledge that every local authority operates in a different context and may play a different role in the delivery of the new community. This guide does not specify how local authorities should conduct their in-house programme management. Rather, it sets out the key principles that should be considered and complements the suite of TCPA guidance on delivery. Next slide. So Sam has already outlined some of the challenges, but just to reiterate, these include ownership of land and delivery, strategic infrastructure funding, multi-decade delivery timelines, a myriad of stakeholders, and sometimes a lack of in-house skills and resources. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the role played by the local authority in the programme management of a new community will vary, depending on the specifics of land ownership and organisation. The processes adopted and the resources needed are likely to differ, not only from case to case, but also throughout the lifetime of each programme. Based on the research, we have tried to come up with a diagram to illustrate the main relationships which show the roles and consequences for local authorities as a landowner, a developer or wholly owned company, a joint venture partner with a promoter or developer, and as a planning authority, which may involve additional responsibilities such as placemaking and community engagement, for example. The need for programme management decreases as you move down the roles, but it's still useful at every level. Next slide. Sorry. I can just go back one. The diagram is available to look at in more detail in the guides, because I know this is quite a lot of information there. The key principles set out in this guide are directed at those who wish to take a lead in programmatic approach to delivery. Next slide. So the first principle looked at shared visions and execution plans. A strong shared vision for the new community is important to ensure that development is not pursued in a piecemeal way and to ensure the ambition of the local authority and its partners is achieved. It should set from the outset what the golden thread that provides clarity and consistency on what will be delivered. It is crucial for the vision to have a strong corporate and political buy-in within the local authority. Another key task is to create an overall programme execution plan, which provides an overview of the stages and the process for the whole lifetime of the programme, answers the 6 strategic questions of what, why, where, when, who, and how, identifies the personnel, resources that will be needed and when, and their roles and responsibilities in the programme. The plan should be a short document that presents a flow of tasks against each key timescales, be fit for purpose, focus on the key deliverables and be clear about expected outcomes, rather than creating processes for the sake of it. We also found that planning performance agreements were frequently used as a flexible programme management tool that can help in creating and structuring a collaborative process between partners on visioning, feasibility, and developing local plan documents. Next slide, please. So we found a good example of creating a shared vision at Ashford Borough Council for the new South of Ashford Garden Community, which is providing over 7,000 homes and associated facilities. Early precedents on design quality and long-term stewardship were secured in policy through the Area Action Plan and the Design Code, and further supported by a Section 106 agreement, as well as non-statutory documents such as the Quality Charter, which was signed by all the private and public sector partners, and the Community Development Strategy, to be led by the Chilmington Management Organisation, which is a distinct non-profit stewardship body. With 3 separate developments being built over different time frames and involving 7 developer partners, a cohesive vision was vital. Plans for a strategic park for the borough necessitated a council-led design approach. Looking beyond red line boundaries, a series of collaborative workshops and focus groups helped in drawing up an approach to link up transport, landscape design and community amenities in the interests of both existing residents and new residents to come. This resulted in widespread endorsement by partners and community members of the South of Ashford Garden Community Vision and Strategy, containing an action plan and the first illustration of the whole garden community. So to summarise, our first recommendation was, early on, a clear vision should be agreed by all partners, underpinned by a strong programme execution plan. Kova will now take us through the next recommendations.
Thank you very much, Alex. So the next set of recommendations that I will outline focus on the different areas and ways a local authority can use project and programme management tools to plan for and deliver a large-scale new community. The first one that I will mention focuses on the resourcing of the project. Local authorities should commit significant time and resources to setting up appropriate programme and project structures from the beginning. As Alex mentioned, local authorities have different degrees of involvement in the delivery process, so resourcing will vary depending on their position. However, the resourcing of the team is local authority. The resourcing of the team is local authority-led or partner-led. It is crucial to identify key roles such as program director or program manager and the right people to deliver these roles. When the team is being set up, it is useful to carry out a skills and capacity audit to assess upfront how to take the project forward. Organizing an appropriate management structure includes involving a governance structure, something that I'll expand on later, working groups, and other departments within the local authority to consider specific development needs. As outlined in the graph in the slide, through our survey, we find that a wide set of departments are involved in the delivery of new communities, so the project management team and the planning team should be in contact with those departments regularly. A particularly good example of resourcing that we found out through our survey, through our research, was the one of Manidown North Garden Community. This is a new community of 3,250 homes delivered by Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council and Hampshire County Council, or in a joint venture with a private developer. The local authority made the case early on to have a dedicated team with enough resources to deliver the new community. The team borrows expertise from the teams at the borough and county council levels, pulling planning resources from the different departments. They have a team of 12, and some of the roles are set out in the slide here, like head of commercial development, an accountant, communication and engagement officer, etc. We are going to hear from Andrew from Basingstoke Council later, so hopefully he can provide more details later. The next principle that we focus on is around the governance structure. So the governance structure oversees the delivery and sets out how the program will operate. It establishes and implements the program of a decision-making framework and develops ways of working. It should be established from the outset and should be regularly reviewed to ensure they are fit for purpose as the delivery of the program moves forward. Most local authorities have a governance structure set up, but having the right people involved at the right time is the most important thing. The purpose of the governance body is both about decision-making and leadership. So decision makers need to understand the vision and the different aspects of the development of the program to ensure corporate buy-in. The importance of a clear governance structure is reflected in the example of Hemel Garden Communities. Hemel Garden Communities is a partnership between St Albans City and District Council, the Corran Borough Council, Hertfordshire County Council, Hertfordshire Let, and the Crown Estate. As a cross-boundary program, it is vital to have a clear governance structure to ensure that all parties have equal representation, but also to achieve consensus. The governance structure accounts for the input of all the partners and clearly outlines how information and reporting travels between the different stakeholders. In this case, the governance groups are still being embedded and are kept under regular review, so they are as effective as the new community develops. The next recommendation that we include in the guidance looks at the role of project management in the engagement of partners. As you all know, the number of partners involved in the delivery of a new community will be vast, so positive collaborative working is crucial. Partners need to go through a process of consensus building to ensure that the vision of the development is agreed by all parties and avoid blockages. This principle is underpinned by communication, a common sense of purpose, and collaboration. The role of the project and program manager is to ensure that stakeholder engagement is happening, but not necessarily lead the engagement. It is about creating the opportunities to make sure that the right people talk to each other at the right time. As I mentioned, corporate buy-in is crucial, and there needs to be a high degree of political engagement to help win hearts and minds so that everyone can realize the vision. Engaging local elected members is very useful to aid communication, especially with local residents, and help promote the benefits of the new community. It is not easy to manage the political environment that local authorities face. Some have to deal with two-tier areas, others with cross-boundary working, where councils may have different political alignments. So political aspirations need to be handled carefully. An example of a complex net of stakeholders is the one of St Cuthbert's Garden Village. St Cuthbert's Garden Village project is led by Carlisle City Council and is a development of up to 10,000 new homes. The development has 120 landowners and no master developer. So the local authority has been leading engagement from the beginning of the project with the landowners. These are mostly farmers and some with commercial uses. Landowners have been generally willing, and the council has worked with them to understand land value aspiration and raise the issue of land value equalization. This means that the land for building should be sold at the same price as the land for green infrastructure. It has been important for the local authority to understand the constraints and opportunity that affect these landowners. And the fact that the local authority seeks to understand these factors that affect landowners has facilitated the good relationship between the council and farmers. The fragmented pattern of land ownership has made it an imperative that landowners are willing to cooperate. The local authority seems to have done a good job in ensuring that the key messages around this are generally understood and supported. If you are interested in this case study, we have outlined it in the publication in more detail. The last recommendation that we include in the publication is around monitoring and reporting. The monitoring of the delivery of new communities will vary greatly depending on the type of development. As we have outlined throughout the whole publication, there's not a single approach, as each local authority reports in a way that is effective for their context and audience. Some local authorities monitor progress through routine meetings with relevant stakeholders, others produce reports to senior leadership teams, and others use frameworks and performance metrics to set milestones and monitor risk. The most important thing is that reporting should not be done for the sake of reporting, and the quality of information is crucial. In the slides outlined here, we've outlined some points that local authority officers should consider when producing a report. By answering these questions, local authorities can report and monitor in more effective ways. So the officer should ask themselves, what is the purpose of this report? Who is going to look at it? What is being reporting on? How is the information going to be collected, etc. And I'll just briefly mention a couple of methods that can be used to report in effective ways and how they can be used for different audiences. So for example, the traffic light assessment that tends to be used to report to stakeholders and elected members is a good approach to show data in a digestible format that is quick to understand and helps make decisions based on best performance. On sort of the other side of the spectrum, we have Gantt charts, which tend to be used internally and give a more complete overview of the program and break down the project tasks so they can be assigned and their timelines defined. This brings a common understanding of the planned activities and it helps to build and maintain momentum. So just to wrap up, here's the complete list of recommendations that are outlined in the publication. And just to finish off, I would like to say that there is a huge opportunity for local authorities to drive successful delivery of new communities using a programmatic approach. And this guidance has outlined the first steps to take into that process. Thank you very much. I think here's once again the link to the publication. And we will be starting the Q&A in a second if the rest of us join in.
Great, thank you so much, Kova and Alex. Huge amount of information in that guide for everyone to digest and have a look, and a huge amount of research that went into that, and those what appear to be sort of high-level recommendations beneath those are some really, really useful practical experience in places that are actually delivering on the ground. So we do have some time now for Q&A, so please that everyone's able to join us again for that. I do have some questions lined up, but before we delve into those, I'd wanted to just introduce Patrick Clark, who leads the master planning practice at ACOM, and who TCPA has done a lot of work with on new communities work over the years. And this project's been interesting working between different parts of ACOM, hasn't it, Patrick? And you were just going to share some of the experience you've learned through this project that might be useful for others.
Yes, thanks very much, Katie, and also Alex, Kova and Sam for the really good presentations. Just a quick observation from me and then a couple of learning points, if I may. I think the planning and delivery of new communities has been one of the really big success stories of the last decade, as local authorities across the country have really stepped up to plan at a bigger scale and embrace the vision for a new generation of garden communities. And in doing so, they've now created a program of projects capable of delivering hundreds of thousands of homes. So I think the first point is just recognizing where we are. We have a major program of community building that's capable of making a significant contribution to long-term housing needs and to the post-COVID recovery. And we do really urgently need to invest, I think, in the program, in the professional and institutional skills needed to support that delivery. And I think I'm delighted that ACOM have been able to support the TCPA in preparing and researching this really timely guide to program management and highlighting the importance of that skill set in turning sort of the vision for garden communities into reality. I think a key learning point for me is that this isn't just about bringing in a team of program and project managers at the point when a project moves from outline planning into delivery, although clearly that's essential. These projects, as Sam and Alex has highlighted, are really, really complex from the outset in terms of their scale, the infrastructure requirements, the multiplicity of different stakeholders involved. And we know from recent experience they're subject to significant planning risk. And so I think my view, working through this process with the TCPA has been to recognise increasingly the value of having a programme management set of skills embedded in the project from the outset to de-risk projects and to significantly improve their chances of success. That's been a really important learning point for me. I just highlight two key aspects of that. One is the sort of benefits realisation that Sam drew out. I've been able at the early stages to give people assurance of how the vision that you're setting out is actually going to be translated into what's going to be built on the ground. And then secondly, I think smoothing the process from the consenting stage into delivery, so we don't get a situation where you have one team designing a project, getting consent and then stopping the project and another team coming in to deliver it, but making that transition more smoothly to hold on to the golden thread and to keep the momentum going. So I think, for all those reasons, we benefit from a stronger programmatic approach to the delivery of garden communities and new settlements from the outset. I think the guides are a really important step in setting out the key principles for success. And I think MHCLG could really recognise and invest in capacity funding to support the development of those skills in practice.
That's great. Thanks, Patrick, for those observations. It's really useful to sort of step back and remember that we're talking about trying to deliver really highly ambitious places with high standards that will be fair for everyone and stand the test of time. And so it's great to understand how the different details and technical approaches can help us to achieve that. And we do have quite a few questions, so I'm going to move quickly onto those, starting actually at the end about, we have talked a lot, this guide and the session today has focused a lot on local authorities taking the lead in delivery. And Alex, at the start of your presentation, you set out some of the different scenarios of the different roles that local authorities play in the delivery process. And of course, there is a whole host of other sectors that lead on these projects as well. Can you give us some examples of the different scenarios before we delve back into the detail?
Yeah, sure. So with the diagram, we were very conscious that it's not as simple as that. But during the stakeholder meeting, we found that it was useful to make a distinction between the different roles that local authorities can play. And we found that the majority of local authorities will be in the second two roles, which if you just move on to the next slide. Yeah, so a lot of them are either acting as a planning authority or in a joint venture. So for example, Manydown, Basingstoke is in a joint venture, and so they have a large team to sort of help with the programme management. As a local authority, we're not, if you're acting as a local authority, we're not saying that you don't need project management. We just think, and we do think it's important to invest earlier in this, just that the role might be slightly less than if you were in a joint venture or if you were the developer itself. And then there are other examples of where local authorities are playing more than one role. So Whitehill and Borden, who we'll hear from in a minute, they're acting as the planning authority for the majority of the community, but then they also own pieces of land as well. So they might play a different role within that development for the pieces of land that they own, but also act as a planning authority for the rest of it. So there's lots of different combinations, and we recognise it's not as simple as this, but we thought it might be useful to try and make a distinction.
There's never one size fits all with these approaches, but it is useful to see that. And we've had a follow-up sort of comment about that as well. And I think with the new communities group, all the places that you surveyed and spoke to as part of this research, the local authority isn't usually the master developer. So the learning and sharing of expertise within this report is actually based on those situations that most of the local authorities are facing at the moment, in terms of those different roles where the site is led by the landowner or developer, or different levels of partnership. So hopefully that learning will be shared in there as well. A couple of things about partners here before we get onto that. We had a question about how to integrate sustainability and high sustainability construction approaches with these large-scale complex processes. Sam, Patrick, if you need to, is that something you can help explain for us? How do you ensure that you're actually going to get high sustainability standards through the delivery process for new communities?
Yeah, if I go first and then maybe Patrick can follow up with from a design perspective. But I think, you know, that's a core function of what the vision will entail. I imagine you set that out at the beginning about, you know, this site will be exemplar in achieving net zero by X or whatever it be. And by having that strategic objective, you then link a series of objectives into that, and that flows through into the specifications for the designers, and then that flows through into the specification for the buildings and construction, and so on and so forth. And you make that a fundamental tenet of what you judge the success of the scheme as you go through. Just thinking about a recent example in, well, not so recent now, but in Northwest Cambridge, the Eddington extension by the University of Cambridge, you know, that was a Code for Sustainable Homes level 5, and that was a core principle of the development that was, you know, front and center about in most decisions. So it links through into governance and how you're making decisions associated with the trade-offs, so that you're not compromising on that core principle or core objective.
Patrick, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, just to emphasise, I think Sam has the importance of having the right sort of technical expertise embedded in the master planning and design process from the outset, so that you can be cited on what the key opportunities are and ensure that they're sort of embedded in the project from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those things may not be immediately obvious. You know, you manage groundwater resources, whatever else, are by definition things that you can't just see on the site. They need to be understood from a technical perspective.
Absolutely, and it's something we've learned over the years working with these larger scale projects and local authorities. It's as well about making that upfront corporate commitment to the standards that are going to be delivered in the development. You know, in an ideal world, that would be in your local plan or specific to DPD or planning document for the site. And then you would be, you know, the delivery of that would be held accountable throughout the project. We don't live in an ideal world, but some of these programmatic approaches can at least hope through the sort of monitoring can help to ensure that those processes are integrated throughout the process. And that is so important. It's so crucial to make sure that people are brought along with this process. These are big, complex, politically challenging projects, which if people aren't properly involved in the process, are going to be really, really difficult to deliver, and we won't get the outcomes that anybody wants. And actually, that's one of the recommendations that the publication focuses on, is about developing good relationships with other programme partners within the team delivering the development, and then also how that relates to wider community participation, which of course needs to be integral from the beginning of the process. I was wondering if you could just touch on how the project management approaches can help with that process.
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned it, well, and as you just said, project management is crucial to engage with partners, but we also found that it's extremely important to deal with community engagement. And we do have a wide set of guidance out there setting out how to do public engagement, but maybe it's worth highlighting one of the examples that we found, which is of St. Cuthbert's Garden Village again, which have been extremely proactive in engaging with the local community. And St. Cuthbert's, Carlisle City Council recognized that they wanted to make the Garden Village a high quality destination, you know, which people can thrive. And they created this very strong narrative based on the vision of the program. And I think that goes back to some of the things that we were discussing earlier, and some of the recommendation of the importance of having a strong vision. And, you know, in the publication, we outline how we have used this narrative based on the vision to engage with the public through wider marketing of the program and through public consultations. And there was something that is quite interesting, which is the development of their brand based on that vision and that narrative, which I think is really interesting in terms of how that approach can help with community engagement.
I think thanks Kova, that's really useful. I mean, and that is one of the core challenges around delivery more widely, and I know we're not focused on the broader delivery challenge here, we're focused on that program, but it's really useful to see some of the examples and evidence in the guide and how to do that. And I think it's sort of, as I mentioned before, you know, some of the approaches that we would like to take are only possible in an ideal world, which we do not live in. And some of those is open to changes, political changes, to other influences, global pandemics, you know, all sorts of financial and economic and political challenges. And Sam, I was wondering if you can just sort of reiterate how the programmatic approach that's being advocated can help to build resilience against some of those unknown forces which will come up over the 20-30 year delivery timescale.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that flexibility point. You need to create the framework of how this will be delivered, and if you put robust governance in place, it means that as you move forward, you can always check back and say, right, okay, the plan's changed. You know, we either need to slow down or we need to accelerate development. What does that mean in terms of? I'm sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, and what does that mean in terms of the build out and cash flow? Does it trigger new infrastructure if we accelerate? And so, you know, all those things need to be taken in a balanced, and decisions need to be taken in a balanced way, and that can only be done through effective leadership, but then also through the governance processes. And so that's, you know, that's probably one of it is one of the pillars that we set out as part of the program management approach. And yeah, does that answer the question fully?
Yeah, no, that's helpful, thank you. And we've had another couple of questions to move on soon. A lot of what has been outlined already in the presentation relies on having a skilled team of people to deliver within the local authority and within the private sector delivery partners as well. And I know, Alex, remember for some of the early days of the New Communities Group, we had people delivering projects of tens of thousands of homes, and there were 3 individuals in the local authority who were doing it on the periphery of other jobs that they had to do. You know, compare that with the new town development corporations who had hundreds of dedicated staff with their own offices to do that, and that is changing with things like capacity funding. But that point about capacity and skills has come up several times, and actually we've had a comment about how we can encourage that wider breadth of skills to work in local authorities again. And I know there's fantastic initiatives such as Public Practice, which is actively doing that, and we know that they're working with many of the New Communities Group partners as well. Patrick and Sam, you work in the private sector. What do you think can be done to encourage the investment of those skills in local authorities?
I mean, you said earlier that this is one of the most exciting tasks in urbanism, which, you know, in terms of sort of the planning and delivery of new communities. I thought that was a really nice observation, which I made a note of. But I think that, you know, that opportunity for people to be involved in projects that make a real difference. You know, these are projects that can transform communities, people's lives, livelihoods, and opportunity. Help address climate change, build a more resilient future. There's a great sort of opportunity to shape whole neighbourhoods and places. So I would like to think that there are many people who have a strong interest in deploying their professional skill sets in that sort of really worthwhile endeavour. I think that there is a need for the continued development of some form of centre of sort of national sort of excellence, expertise. You know, that may well be around the group that you've established at the TCPA and the New Communities Group, and that way of sharing expertise and knowledge. But, you know, as I said, I think, you know, we also need to recognise that we are seeking to deliver a national programme of community building, and that's a big endeavour, and it needs significant support from government to make it happen and to unlock the full potential, not just in terms of delivering the unit numbers, but creating the legacy. Because I think as with the original garden communities, if we get the planning and design of them right so that they remain sort of enduring places where people want to live long into the future, they renew themselves, they become the gift that keeps on giving, supporting healthy lives, productive lives, and represent a sort of, one of the most important investments that one generation can make for the next.
Okay, great, thank you. We will save a bit of time with the Q&A on it. There's a couple of others questions. One, just a quick one. We had a question about how this approach applies to different scales of development. So we've talked about larger scale new communities, but Sam, to what extent does this approach also apply to urban extensions or inner urban regeneration sites?
Absolutely. I think, if you're focused on the why rather than the what, then you need to deliver it as a program, because you're dealing with benefits and you're dealing with delivery of outcomes rather than it's just a building with 250 units. You're thinking about the wider complexities around how that integrates with the existing context and what have you. So I think absolutely it's scalable, it's flexible, and it's totally appropriate for those situations.
We've also had a couple of questions about zero carbon new communities, how you actually resource that and how you make the numbers stack up in terms of the viability of achieving some of these high ambitions. We have written separately about that and how to achieve that and the challenges of it, and we can share those publications with you at the end of this, and because of time we won't talk about that right now, but happy to sort of address questions about that afterwards or in the next Q&A, and we can send you some other details about that, because of course that is also at the heart of the challenge. But we will move on now because we've got a couple of other additional fantastic speakers that we want to hear from today. But Kova, Alex, Patrick and Sam, thanks very much for your presentations. We're going to hear now from a couple of local authorities who are delivering these projects with partners on the ground. The first is Andrew Reynolds, who is the project director of the Manydown development and chief operating officer of the Manydown LLP at Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. He's leading one of the largest garden communities in the southeast, and has been working with a different range of projects. Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Housing. Before joining Basingstoke and Dean, Andrew worked with Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council to develop Solihull's HS2 proposition, and a number of other initiatives in that area along with Wakefield. But let's hear about Manydown. Andrew, we're going to hear about your experience of programme management there. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for that introduction, and it's really great to be here today to take part in the sort of feedback of the work that you've been doing and how we look at project managing complex developments. Some interesting questions. I think just picking up on sort of the public and the private sector. I think if you reflect on the public sector, we are different. We have to balance social value, the benefits to residents, and clearly the political climate, which is very different to where the private sector come in. And I think we also wear a multiple of different hats in terms of both our planning role, our strategic and enabling roles, and in our case for Manydown, it's delivery. So I think it's quite interesting how people reflect on the different role of the local authority. I'm not here to tell you about programme management per se. You can Google that. I know Sam gave a good account in terms of what programme management is about, but really this is just our experience, where we started and where we are today, and really some of our learning as we've gone through the process, because it is about evolving the whole process. So next slide, please. So I'll just give you a very short context for Manydown. I will then explain our Manydown programme, and then just go through our approach and experiences through the project management that we've undertaken, and then some of my reflections really in terms of learning. Next slide, please. So Basingstoke is approximately 45 minutes from London, 25 minutes from Southampton, and the site of Manydown, which is the blue blob that you can see in the middle of sort of Basingstoke, is on the western fringe of Basingstoke town centre. extends from the A339, which is the main link between Basingstoke and Newbury, all the way down to junction 7 on the M3, which will then provide the access out onto the M3 itself. So extending, so next slide please. So extending to somewhere in the region of about 834 hectares of land that the two councils acquired back in 1996 for development over a number of planned periods. We hold, and I say we, that is Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Deane Council, hold the land under a 999-year lease, so we effectively control the land, and as soon as we've secured planning, we can then trigger the option to purchase. The current land at the moment, as you can see identified by the red line, is severed by a railway line, so we have what we call a north and south proposition, and the total land take at the moment has the potential around about 8,000 homes. Just to the south, which is not identified on the plan, but just to the south of our land, we also have an adjoining landowner called Society of Merchant Venturers, who we're working collaboratively with at the moment in terms of bringing forward Many Down South. And that also includes a proposition for potentially a new medical campus facility. So we've got an extensive amount of work that's going on. Many Down North is a primary focus at the moment. We'll come on to that. So next slide, please. So the programme itself stems back a number of years, but ultimately within the programme we had three key projects. The first was securing outline planning for Many Down North, which was for 3,520 homes and associated infrastructure. We started on this back in probably 2014, in earnest, 2013, 2014. And we've been working on this in great detail up to the current day. Yes, it's taken a fair amount of time to get there, but in 2020 we did secure a resolution to grant, and we also in the process now just concluding the section 106. So for us that was a really key milestone, and just reflecting on the point that was made earlier, we did this in the pandemic. So in terms of securing that outline, it was a corporate approach to achieving the consent and running a virtual committee to achieve this. The second part of the programme was procuring a joint venture private sector development partner. Again, there's been some comments about are we master developers or not as local authorities. The councils, Basingstoke and Hampshire, took the view that we're not technically a master developer. We were there to promote the land, to secure the outline planning, and then we felt we needed to bring the skills in to support us in delivering the development. So the decision was taken to go for a joint venture partner. And again, that procurement started back in 2015. And again, in July last year, we were able to enter into that contract with Urban and Civic and the Wellcome Trust. So again, a really important milestone for the project. The third element was developing the technical evidence base for the preparation to promote Southern Many Down. As I've just mentioned, Southern Many Down in itself, both the land south of the railway line and the adjacent landowner, could deliver somewhere in the region of an additional 11,000 new homes. So potentially across Many Down, we are looking somewhere in the order of about 15,000 homes coming forward over 2+ planned periods. The caption there, just as a slight aside, is again, as part of securing outline planning, we felt that it was important that we progress some of the environmental works and the ecology mitigation work. So in advance of preparing the site, the need to ensure that we get early ecology underway, we took it upon ourselves to have almost a subtask and went forward with a planning consent to deliver and plant out 16,000 shrubs and trees. That was back in, again, early 2020. So even though we have the main elements of the programme, there are a number of projects and work streams that sit within that we as the project team took forward and have delivered. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about our approach and experience, and some of this has been reflected upon earlier. very much around that back in 2015, roughly, both councils identified the need to have a dedicated project team. It was felt the need to actually go forward and deliver a successful outline planning application needed a dedicated team. That the cost of that was going to be equally shared between the two councils, and very much around the need to ensure equally in parity of costs, and that was both staff costs and the technical costs. There was a work done to identify resources and skills, and at the time there was a project manager and I think a commercial manager that was brought in to support the project with a very sort of lean team to start the project off with. But nevertheless, there was skills drawn from the individual authorities such as legal, such as planning and procurement to help progress the projects, in particular the first two projects within the programme, to get them underway. And I think that was important in terms of then establishing the governance, and for Many Down within the borough in particular, because obviously the site is based in the borough, the council was very keen to establish what is called a Many Down Overview Committee, which is a cross-party membership, which has been probably one of the most successful parts